Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Life comes at you fast sometimes, and if you need a lesson in that, just go ahead and look at the Georgia Bulldogs. The last time we talked about the Georgia Bulldogs on this show, at least on the field, they were the belle of the ball. Everybody in college football was looking up at them in the standings. Georgia on a 29-game win streak going into the SEC championship game. They were the #1 team in America, unbeatable, hadn't lost a game since the 2021 season, hadn't lost a regular season game, which I guess they still technically haven't, since the 2020 season. Everything was going good for Georgia. Then they go to Atlanta. They play a hard-fought game against Alabama. They end up losing. Now, because of the way everything else broke, they weren't really an at-large candidate. Think you could argue they were one of the 4 best teams in college football, but probably didn't have a resume to get into a 14 playoff. And so I bring it up because you go into the offseason and you think it's going to be a pretty quiet offseason for Georgia as they get ready for signing day and that Orange Bowl with Florida State. Why do I bring it up? Well, it has been anything but quiet for the Georgia Bulldogs. And frankly, look, let's be blunt here. Like so many other programs in college football, the offseason started like it did for, again, 132 other programs. Lost a player or two in the portal. Then another one. Then another one. Then another one. Then another. And all of a sudden you look up, and this is where it got interesting. Late last week, you're losing players, but it's mostly backups. It's mostly guys that weren't going to see the field, whatever. Then late last week, Jamon Dumas-Johnson, one of the star players of your 2022 national championship run, a linebacker. You start to hear rumblings that he's going to enter the portal. He does. On Friday, A.J. Harris, a former 5-star cornerback in the class of 2023, just completed a true freshman year in which he appeared in 7 games. He enters the transfer portal. In total, Georgia now has 18 players in the portal. And beyond that, as we discussed on last week's show, Dylan Raiola, the #1 quarterback in America, according to 24/7 Sports, has been committed to Georgia since May, moved to Georgia to play his senior year of football. Well, this past weekend, he was on campus at Nebraska, visiting Nebraska. His uncle is an assistant coach there. His dad played there. And it looks like, for all intents and purposes, he is about to flip to Nebraska. Maybe by the time you listen to this segment, he has. And so I bring it up because, listen, there's an argument that attrition happens everywhere, but 18 players in the portal, plus the #1 recruit in America, or at least the #1 quarterback, according to 24/7 Sports, may flip. And it has led to a lot of people asking, is there something wrong with Georgia? By the way, not just me, not just Torres making stuff up. Maybe the more prominent Aaron in college football media, certainly the more prominent one, because I didn't throw for any touchdown passes for Georgia. But Aaron Murray, star at Georgia, came on this show about a year ago before Georgia's national championship game appearance against TCU. He put out a tweet on Friday that caught my attention. Here is what Aaron Murray tweeted. I'm going to read it verbatim, so there's no confusion. He said, "I don't know if I have ever seen this many 5-stars leave a program before. What in the world is happening in Athens? These top recruits not liking all the competition? Question mark." And so I bring it up because, listen, this isn't message board fodder. This isn't Aaron Torres, me, trying to make up some narrative that's anti-Georgia. Even people in the Georgia community are wondering, is there something going on? Is there a bigger picture issue? What the heck is going on at Georgia? Well, I'm here to talk about it, and I'm here to say this. 1, it's certainly not great, certainly not ideal, certainly not exactly what you're hoping for if you're a Georgia Bulldogs fan. But what I will also say is, like so many other things in life, it's a little bit more complicated than maybe meets the eye. Now, in terms of the negatives, I'm not going to beat around the bush. You never want to lose 18 players in the portal. And just to make sure that I wasn't missing anything, I went ahead and reached out to somebody that's pretty close to the coaching staff on Sunday morning. I knew I was going to be talking about this on Monday's show, and I reached out to somebody that knows that staff well, and I just said, I just said, hey, it's Torres, and I'm just curious, like, am I missing something? Is there and more importantly, not only am I missing something, but more importantly, of the Georgia guys that actually left, how many of them are guys that Kirby didn't want to lose, right? Because you know how the narrative goes. You lose a bunch of, well, we were expecting all these guys. And this guy told me point blank, talks to the coaching staff all the time. He said, look, Torres, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There were 2 or 3 guys that they did not anticipate losing and that they did not want to lose. Jamon DiMaggio Johnson was one. Yes, he got hurt late in the year. Yes, he has a capable replacement behind him, but I don't think they were planning on losing him, one of the star players of their title run a year ago and a star player this past season. AJ Harris, the cornerback, who we'll talk about his first visit in the coming segment, they were not planning on losing him. So I want to make that clear. Before I get to why this is not quite as big of a deal as a lot of people think, I want to go ahead and say, if anyone tries to tell you that Georgia did not lose a single player that they wanted to keep, that's a lie. And every team loses players that they want to keep this time of year, and Georgia is no different. At the same time, though, I do think that context in this situation matters. And context is where I'm not as worried about Georgia as everybody else is. In terms of the 18 portal players, let's dive into the portal players, okay? So one, what I would say, it is worth noting, like whether you like Georgia, hate Georgia, whatever, the bottom line is that this is something that happens everywhere in college football, right? And that is important to note. It's bigger because Georgia is one of the 2 or 3 biggest brands in college football right now, the 2-time reigning national champion, because their players are more high profile, because they recruit more 5-stars, they're going to lose more 5-stars. And so I think it's important to note, everybody loses players this time of year. Go ahead and look at Texas A&M. Texas A&M lost probably 7, 8 super high-profile players over the last couple weeks. Many of them are players that their fans would want to keep. You go on down the list. Florida, I think you could argue Florida lost its best offensive player in Etienne and its best edge rusher who just committed to Ole Miss. We'll talk about him in a minute. By the way, Etienne is trending towards Georgia for everybody that's freaking out. So the idea is everybody loses people, even good players, even good teams. By the way, the only schools that you don't really hear much about right now are the ones that are in the playoff. Alabama hasn't really lost that much, but guess what? When the season ends, they're going to lose guys that they probably don't want to lose. Same with Texas, same with Washington, same with Michigan. This is part of how it all works. 2, I do think it's worth noting, it's a little bit of a unique circumstance at Georgia as well. 1, it is worth noting, one of their marquee assistant coaches left to take the head coaching job at Syracuse. His name is Fran Brown. He's from the Northeast area, and he went to Syracuse. And so with him, a guy that had as good a relationships as anybody in that building walked out the door. Doesn't mean players don't like Kirby. Doesn't mean players don't like the other coaches. That's not what I'm saying. But he leaves. All of a sudden, a couple guys enter the portal, and I've already seen 1 or 2 of them commit to Syracuse. So that's part of it as well. But more importantly, here's the other fact, is that even these really good players, there are other good players playing with them and competing with them for spots. And while I love Aaron Murray, this is not a criticism in 1 second of 1 sense of what he said. The bottom line is, even the players that have left, even the super high profile players, there was no guarantee there was playing time because Georgia is so freaking stacked at pretty much every position. You know, you look at somebody like Jamon DiMaggio Johnson, as high profile as anybody in the portal, but he got hurt in early November. And guess what happened? A 5-star kid from last year's recruiting class named CJ Allen stepped in, took his starting spot, and was really, really, really good. And you're not going to not play that kid next year. And so DiMaggio Johnson, it's almost, I don't want to make an apples to apples comparison, but, he kind of said, look, I had the spot. This kid came in. Maybe I need to go somewhere where I know I'm going to have the spot again. And it's not that he doesn't want to compete. I'm just stating a fact, right? AJ Harris, the corner. Go ahead and look at that cornerback room. Malachi Starks, unbelievable. He's been unbelievable since the day he stepped on campus. There are other high-profile corners in that building. And oh, by the way, guess who the number 1 cornerback in the country is coming into next year in this current high school class? Kid named Ellis Robinson, who plays at IMG Academy. Now, he's from New Haven, Connecticut. Shout out to Connecticut. produces all sorts of good football players, including me. But Ellis Robinson, number one cornerback in the country, is coming in. And so a kid like AJ Harris, he sees guys in front of him. He sees guys behind him. I'm not saying that you don't wish he stayed and competed. It certainly helps your depth, but he decides to leave. And so that's part of it. And I think the last part is exactly what I said. Go ahead and look at those 24/7 recruiting rankings right now. Now, I get it. Dylan Raiola, we'll see what happens. But you know who has the number one class in the country? It's Georgia. Georgia's the number one class in the country, 28 total commits. I think it's 10 of the 28 are in the top 100 players nationally. I think about 21, 22 of them are 4 or 5 stars. And so there's a lot of talent coming in. First of all, simple math equation. Quote my buddy JJ Redick, it's a math equation, F-head. That's me. He called me an F-head for people who have never heard that JJ Redick rant. But I bring it up, and I'm all over in this segment, by the way. Great way to start the show. But I bring it up because it's a math equation. They don't have 28 guys graduating. They have 28 guys coming in, and you got to start to figure out the scholarship situation. A lot of them are at positions where the players that left were getting recruited over. And so I just bring all this up to say, I'm not going to go on and on. You kind of get the point. But when I look at the Georgia situation, I'll be blunt. I'm not really that worried. One, they're still as talented as anybody in college football. They have the number one recruiting class coming in. You even look at somebody like Dylan Raiola, who we didn't even talk about, that quarterback who's visiting Nebraska. Part of it is that Carson Beck is probably going to come back next year, and Dylan Raiola is not going to see the field. And you can like it, you can hate it, but I think he's going to Nebraska, or he plans on, or it appears as though he's going to flip to Nebraska because of the fact that he's sitting around saying, well, wait a second now, at least at Nebraska, I can see the field. I might not start right away. I might not start day one, but I'll have a chance. So when I look at Georgia, I know everybody's freaking out. And I'm not going to lie, there are players in that program that I know the coaching staff wanted to keep. But while the number is big, 18 players, oh my goodness, sound the alarms. I don't think it's quite as big of a deal as everybody makes it out to be. All right, that's what we're going to do.